Kellyanne Conway stood stiffly behind her lectern in the brightly lit CNN studio. Her face was red and her usually perfect hair couldn't hide her rising anger. Across from her, Representative Jasmine Crockett sat calmly, hands neatly folded on the table. "You have zero authority," Conway snapped, her voice echoing through the studio as she pointed a finger at Crockett. "You sit there with that smug look lecturing me about honesty after what your side has done." The studio audience gasped. The host froze. Executives in the control room leaned forward. It seemed Conway had finally lost the famous composure that got her through countless political battles. But what happened next shocked everyone into silence. Jasmine Crockett's response, just 7 words spoken with total calm, would go viral and change how America views political clashes forever. If you like this, hit the like button and subscribe to get our latest political analysis. This story will tell you exactly what happened when 2 of the country's most powerful women faced off and why only one walked away a winner. CNN's special American Intersections had been hyped for weeks. The idea was simple but explosive. Bring political rivals together to discuss the most controversial issues facing the country. Tonight's segment featured Kellyanne Conway, the experienced 57-year-old Republican strategist and former advisor to President Trump, versus Democratic delegate Jasmine Crockett, the rising 43-year-old star from Texas who quickly became known as one of the most articulate voices in Congress. The stakes could not be higher. With midterm elections just weeks away and the nation deeply divided, this was more than just another cable news debate. It was a fight for the heart of American politics. Conway arrived at the studio 3 hours early, as usual. Known for her intense preparation and ability to spin any situation to her advantage, Republicans called her the comeback queen. After years in Washington, she had perfected the art of political combat, leaving many opponents wounded by her sharp comebacks and commitment to conservative values. "Make sure my mic is working," she told the production assistant. "Last time I was on CNN, it mysteriously cut out whenever I made a point that challenged their narrative." The young assistant nodded nervously and hurried away. Meanwhile, in a separate room, Jasmine Crockett reviewed her notes one last time. The former civil rights attorney had built her reputation on facts, not rhetoric. Unlike many politicians who rose through party connections, Crockett earned her place by defending ordinary people in Texas courtrooms. Her calm demeanor hid a brilliant mind that could dismantle weak arguments with precision. "Delegate, they're ready for you in makeup," a producer announced. Crockett nodded, closed her binder, and took a deep breath. "Just remember," her top aide said quietly, "Conway will try to get under your skin. That's what she does." Crockett smiled. "I've faced tougher opponents in courtrooms where my clients' lives were on the line. I can handle this." Neither woman knew that this night would quickly become one of the most watched political showdowns in recent memory, with clips spreading online faster than the networks could track. By morning, one of them would be celebrated as a symbol of grace under pressure, while the other would be left doing damage control after a meltdown seen by millions. Michael Barnes, a reporter who'd seen it all, knew exactly what the network wanted: drama. Conway and Crockett, they were total opposites when it came to how the U.S. should be run. It was the old guard versus the new, the established ways against change, experienced politicians against fresh faces. As Barnes got ready to start the show, he figured he wouldn't have to do much to get them arguing. These 2 women had clashing worldviews that just couldn't mix. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said as the mics went live, "tonight we've got 2 powerful voices who rarely agree on anything. The question is, can they find any common ground, or are we really 2 separate countries with nothing in common?" The first half hour was surprisingly civil. Conway and Crockett disagreed big time on immigration, the economy, and healthcare, but they stayed polite while explaining their positions. Viewers at home expecting fireworks might have been bored, but political insiders could see the subtle digs happening. Conway kept bringing up her years of experience, hinting that Crockett was a newbie who didn't get how things really worked in Washington. "When you've been around as long as I have," she said with a tight smile, "you learn that wishful thinking runs into reality." Crockett fired back with specific laws and court cases, showing she knew her stuff. "The truth is," she replied, "lots of people are waiting for answers, not excuses about why change is too hard." You could feel the tension building in the studio, like a bomb about to go off. Barnes, sensing a big moment, steered the conversation into more personal territory. "Ms. Conway, you've been criticized for backing statements by the former president that turned out to be false. Representative Crockett has called that putting devotion over truth. What's your response?" Conway's face hardened. This was the topic she'd been warned about, the one her team said could get ugly. She leaned forward, gripping the podium. "That's rich coming from the representative," Conway said, her voice sharper. "Her whole platform is built on promises she has no intention of keeping. At least I'm honest about who I support." The camera cut to Crockett, who stayed calm but raised an eyebrow. "I think there's a difference between party loyalty and supporting statements that damage our democracy," she said. "My devotion is to the Constitution and my voters, not to any one person." Conway chuckled, short and harsh. "Oh, please, your devotion is to whatever gets you reelected and keeps you trending on social media. Don't pretend you're some noble defender of democracy when your party is trying to turn the country into something unrecognizable." unrecognizable. Barnes, feeling the shift in the air, tried to regain control. Let's stick to specific policies instead of— No, I want to address this, Conway interrupted, her face flushed. I've sat back and listened to people like the representative lecture everyone about ethics and truth while they twist history to fit their narrative. It's the hypocrisy that's truly amazing. Crockett remained composed, but she sat up straighter. If you'd like to talk about specific instances where you think I've been dishonest, I'm happy to do that, but broad accusations don't give viewers anything to chew on. The studio went silent. You could hear Conway breathing through her microphone as she glared at Crockett. Something had changed in her demeanor, a crack in the polished facade she'd shown the public for years. You want specifics? Fine. Conway shuffled through her papers with unusual nervousness. Let's talk about your speech last month where you claimed that traditional policies have systematically harmed minority communities. That's not just wrong. It's a dangerous lie designed to divide people. Crockett nodded slowly. I stand by that statement, and I can provide thee to back it up. For instance, Conway's voice rose. Yours cherry-picked to support a conclusion you already reached. I've been in politics long enough to know how that game is played. Tactic. This isn't just some game we're playing with people's lives, Crockett said, her voice steady, but with a strength that made people pay attention. These are real folks with real problems that deserve a real conversation. Conway's eyes narrowed. The bright TV lights seemed to make the sweat on her forehead shine even more. Something about Crockett's calm was getting under her skin in a way that few others had managed before. The thing with politicians like you, Conway said, her voice shaking a bit, is that you hide behind fancy words while pushing policies that hurt the very people you claim to help. It's fake sympathy. The camera caught a slight change in Crockett's face, not anger, but something closer to understanding, as if she knew why Conway was getting so worked up. Ms. Conway, she said gently, I spent 15 years fighting for people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers. I've been there with families who lost their homes, their health care, and sometimes their freedom because of bad policies. My worry for them isn't fake. It comes from seeing it firsthand. Conway slammed her hand on the podium. And I've spent 30 years fighting for national beliefs that built this country. Beliefs that your side seems determined to tear down at every chance. Barnes tried to step in again. Let's calm down a bit and— No, Conway's voice got louder. I won't stand here and be lectured about sympathy by someone who's been in the Capitol. For 5 minutes, she turned straight to the camera. The country isn't stupid. They see through the holier-than-thou speeches. What happened next sent waves through the room. As Crockett started to answer, Conway suddenly grabbed a binder and pulled out a copy of a social media post. You want to talk about honesty? Conway's voice was almost a shout. This is a post from your campaign manager suggesting my old boss should be thrown in prison without a trial, and you supported it. She waved the paper at the cameras. Is this your idea of protecting the Constitution? Barnes said firmly. Ms. Conway, we need to verify any documents before— But Conway was beyond control now. All the careful composure was gone, replaced by raw emotion. Everyone knows what's going on here, she yelled, her voice cracking. The double standards, the selective outrage, the acting like you're better than everyone else while you destroy everything that made this country great. The room went silent. Aides in the control room held their breath. This was the kind of unplanned moment leaders dream about. Real, honest, and sure to go viral. All eyes turned to Jasmine Crockett. Crockett didn't answer Conway right away. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate sip of water, keeping eye contact with her increasingly agitated opponent. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. Conway stood stiffly, red-faced and breathing hard, papers clutched in her trembling hand. Crockett sat still, composed, her face showing thoughtful consideration instead of anger. This short pause seemed to frustrate Conway even more. What's wrong? Nothing in your prepared notes to deal with this? She demanded, her voice still loud. Crockett gently set down her water glass and leaned forward slightly. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but carried through the room with perfect clarity. Ms. Conway, I appreciate your passion. Those 7 words, spoken without a hint of sarcasm or superiority, made Conway blink in momentary confusion. But I think the country deserves a conversation, not a fight, Crockett continued. If you'd like to talk about that social media post, I'm happy to do so, but I'd suggest we both take a deep breath first. Conway stayed standing, but something changed in her face, a flicker of doubt, as if she suddenly realized how her behavior might look to viewers at home. Crockett nodded at the paper in Conway's hand. Can I see the entry you're talking about? After a moment, Conway gave the paper to Barnes, who passed it to Crockett. After looking it over, Crockett said, Thanks for pointing this out. This looks like something from a temp worker who helped with my campaign last year, not my campaign manager. We let them go because their speeches didn't line up with what we believe. I never agreed with this message, Crockett added. Actually, I've spoken out against this kind of talk, no matter who's using it. Conway started to interrupt, but Crockett raised her hand slightly, not to stop her, but with the quiet power of someone used to running things. If I could finish, Ms. Conway, I get that you're upset. We both care about our country, but we just see different ways to make it stronger. I think we can disagree without tearing each other down. People want better than political theater. Conway sat back down, obviously trying to regain control. That's convenient, she said, her voice less sharp now. Blame it on an assistant and claim the moral high ground. Crockett shook her head. I'm not claiming anything. I'm just saying maybe we both want what's best for the country, even if we see it differently. Can we at least agree on that? The question hung in the air. Conway looked caught between wanting to attack and knowing that Crockett's calm approach was making her emotional outbursts look silly. Fine, I want what's best for the country, Conway finally said, her tone still tight but no longer shouting. But your party's ideas would change this country in ways a lot of people don't want. Crockett nodded. That's a fair point to discuss, and I could argue that some ideas you've backed have hurt groups I care about. But instead of throwing accusations around, maybe we could focus on specific issues where people need results, not just sound bites. Barnes, sensing a chance to change the subject, jumped in. That sounds like a good plan. Let's talk about the development bill in front of the legislature right now. Legislator Crockett, your party wants it passed. Ms. Conway, some in your party are worried about the cost. Can we look at that before? They could. Conway, still clearly annoyed, made one more attempt to take charge. Before we move on, she said, her composure partly back, but tension still in her voice. I want to make something clear. The legislator can act all reasonable and balanced if she wants, but her voting record tells a different story. She's voted for some of the most extreme laws ever brought before the legislature. Crockett didn't seem bothered by the comment. Instead, she smiled slightly. I stand by my voting record, and I'm happy to explain the reasons behind any vote I've cast. What specific laws worry you most, Ms. Conway? Conway seemed unprepared for the direct question. She fumbled with her papers. Well, there are parts of the Green New Deal that would destroy our energy industry. I'm happy to talk about that, Crockett replied, but I should point out that what was approved was changed a lot from the original proposal, with several compromises. To address concerns from energy-producing states, my own district has energy workers, and I wouldn't vote for laws that didn't include transition measures for those communities. Conway looked more uncomfortable as Crockett continued to respond, with specific details instead of defensive speeches. The dynamic had shifted. Conway, normally the one controlling conversations through emotional appeals and tactical moves, found herself up against someone who wouldn't be baited into an unprofessional fight. The truth is, Crockett went on, looking straight at the camera, people are tired of seeing politicians yell at each other. They want us to fix things. Ms. Conway and I have basic disagreements about policies, but I respect her long service to her party and her country. We don't have to be enemies to be rivals. The audience, who had been told to stay silent during the broadcast, suddenly burst into applause. Barnes tried to shut them up a bit, but it was too late. Conway was quiet, and you couldn't read her face. Maybe for the first time in her long career, she didn't have anything to say. If she'd tried to keep attacking Crockett after that polite response, she would have just looked crazy. So when the clapping died down, Barnes jumped at the chance to get the conversation back on track. Let's talk about growth. People everywhere care about it. They talked for another half hour, but things had changed. Conway wasn't as hostile, and even agreed with Crockett sometimes. Crockett stuck to her facts, but she was nice about it, so she didn't come off as cold or calculating. When Barnes finally wrapped things up, the difference between the beginning and end of the show was huge. We saw something rare tonight, he said. They went from fighting to almost having a real conversation. Maybe there's a lesson here for all of us about how we talk about government. As the cameras were about to shut off, Crockett did something unexpected. She stood up and held out her hand to Conway across the stage. For a second, Conway hesitated. You could see her thinking, how would her supporters take this? But finally, her instincts took over, and she stood up to shake Crockett's hand. Thanks for the talk, Crockett said loud enough for the microphones to pick up. I've watched your career for a long time, and even though we disagree on a lot, you've always been tough. Conway seemed surprised by the genuine compliment. Thanks, Representative, she replied stiffly, but not unkindly. You're definitely prepared. As the show ended and the lights went down, neither woman could have guessed the storm that was about to hit the internet or how people would see their interaction in a country hungry for moments of class during tough times. The reaction was fast and intense. While the CNN crew was still taking down the set, clips of the fight had already started spreading online. The contrast was fascinating. Conway's red-faced yelling against Crockett's calm response. Within an hour of the show, Calm Like Jasmine was trending nationwide on Twitter. People shared the clip of Crockett saying, Ms. Conway, I appreciate your passion, with comments like, this is how you handle someone trying to get you into a shouting match. Great lesson in emotional intelligence. Calm Like Jasmine. Notice how Crockett didn't need to raise her voice to own the room. Power doesn't always look how you expect. By midnight, the original CNN video clip had over 2 million views, and the comments were overwhelmingly praising Crockett's composure. Even users who called themselves conservatives noticed the difference in style. I don't agree with Crockett's politics, but I respect how she handled that situation. Conway lost control, and it didn't look good. This is why yelling doesn't work anymore. The calm person always seems more right, no matter what the real argument is. Morning shows across networks talked about the interaction, with analysts breaking down what happened. On ABC's morning show, political expert Rachel Martin said, what we saw was a perfect example of the generational and stylistic divide in national politics. Conway represents a time when when staged outrage worked. Crockett represents a newer approach that values facts and calm logic over emotional appeals. On a right-leaning news channel, reactions were more mixed. While some analysts criticized Conway for losing her cool, others defended her passion. Kellyanne was fighting for traditional national values, one host argued. Sometimes that fight requires emotion, but the narrative was mostly being driven by how popular Crockett's response was. Memes showing her calm face next to Conway's angry gestures went viral across social media, often set to songs about staying calm under pressure. Young people especially seemed to like Crockett's approach. A high school teacher up north told a local news outlet, "I've had 3 students tell me they want to copy Representative Crockett's style. She showed you can be firm without being mean." The day after the broadcast, both women responded to the public reaction, but in their own ways. Crockett tweeted, "Political disagreement is good for democracy. Personal attacks aren't. Let's have strong debates about ideas, but treat each other with respect. That's not weakness, it's smart." The tweet got over 500,000 likes in hours. Conway responded in a phone call with a supportive radio host. "Of course, they're attacking me for being passionate," she said, still sounding a bit defensive. "When conservatives fight for what they believe in, we're called angry or crazy. When liberals do the same, they're brave in speaking truth to power. It's a double standard." When the host suggested her tone might have helped Crockett, Conway snapped back, "I don't regret standing up for what I believe in." Someone had to call out the hypocrisy. By that afternoon, political experts from both sides were talking about the impact of the exchange. Democratic strategist Maria Cardona told CNN, "Representative Crockett showed a new way to handle political opponents who use anger to provoke by not getting angry back. She totally flipped the script. People were waiting for the moment, watching it eventually." Republican strategist Alex Castellanos, known for his blunt opinions, said Conway made a strategic mistake. "In today's media world, losing your cool almost never works. The person who stays calm usually wins no matter what the argument is." Conway knows this, which makes her losing it even more surprising. Crockett's office was flooded with requests for her to appear on news shows and talk shows. Her communications director said they got over 60 requests within a day of the exchange. Crockett turned down most of them, choosing to appear only on her regular town hall livestream, where she didn't focus on the clash. "I'd rather talk about the bills we need to pass," she told her constituents. "That affects your lives way more than one heated moment on TV." This level-headed response only boosted her reputation for being about substance, not show. Meanwhile, Conway found herself in a strange spot, on the defensive. Longtime supporters quietly worried about her unusual loss of composure. A former colleague told a political magazine anonymously, "Kellyanne has always been the one who gets under other people's skin, not the other way around. Something about Crockett really got to her." News analysis of the clash continued all week, looking beyond the immediate exchange to examine its broader impact on political debate. On a public affairs program, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin noted past parallels. Throughout American history, we've seen times when the tone of political debate shifts. Lincoln's careful, logical arguments stood apart from the fiery speeches of his time. FDR's relaxed chats created a sense of connection during crisis. We might be seeing another such shift where calm logic becomes more persuasive than passionate intensity. The whole thing went beyond just talk and actually got stuff done in government. Because Crockett was suddenly in the spotlight, the Democratic leaders in the House put her in charge of getting the word out on some really important stuff. One older Democratic strategist said she's really good at explaining tricky ideas without losing people's attention. That's not something you see much these days. Crockett also saw a quick boost in fundraising. After her CNN appearance, small donations tripled in just a week. Even better, some moderate political groups that used to stay neutral in her races said they might support her next time. For Conway, this was a wake-up call. At first, she tried to defend herself, but some of the more experienced people around her must have gotten through to her. 3 days later, she was on a radio show, sounding much more thoughtful. "Politics is a passionate business," she said. "Sometimes that passion gets the best of us. I still have concerns about the Congresswoman's ideas, but I could have said what I thought in a better way." This apology helped calm things down a bit. Even though clips of the exchange kept going viral, it started a bigger conversation about being respectful in public debates. Newspapers all over the country talked about the Conway-Crockett thing, saying we need to change how we talk about politics. One newspaper wrote that in a time when yelling and personal attacks are normal, Crockett's response to Conway was refreshing, as that keeping calm isn't just about being polite. It's a smart way to make sure people take what you say seriously. Even a business magazine noted that while a lot of people might agree with what Conway was trying to say, the way she said it hurt her argument, suggesting that there's a lesson here for everyone in politics. Even colleges noticed. Dr. Jennifer Merica, who studies political speaking at a Texas university, told a radio station that this would probably be used in classes on political communication. What makes this moment so important is how it shows how political speaking is changing in the internet age. Now that everything can be easily shared and saved, losing your cool is more of a problem than an advantage. 2 weeks after the debate, polls showed that it had a lasting impact on both women's reputation. stations. Conway's approval rating dropped 7 points among independent voters, while Crockett's went up by 12 points in the same group. Even more telling was a question about who people would trust to handle a crisis calmly. Crockett was the clear winner, leading by a big margin. Maybe the most important thing happened a month later when Crockett was asked to give a speech called Calmness as a political tool. She used her exchange with Conway as a starting point to talk about being respectful in divided times. The speech got over 5 million views in its first week online. The loudest voice in the room isn't always the most powerful, Crockett told her audience. Real influence isn't about being loud or strong, but about being able to stay calm when others are losing it. Looking back, Conway's moment wasn't a big deal in her whole career. People forget stuff fast in politics, and one argument didn't erase all her good work. But some people noticed she seemed calmer afterward, like she realized she needed to chill a bit. So, get this. 6 months later, Conway and Crockett were on the same panel at some women's leadership thing. Everyone was waiting for fireworks. But instead, something interesting happened. Before the event, Conway stopped Crockett and said, "You handled that okay, talking about their fight. I'd have done the same in your shoes." Crockett laughed and said, "I doubt it. You've always been tough, Ms. Conway." Apparently, a production assistant overheard this and told reporters. It showed something about both of them. Even with the politics and drama, they respected each other as professionals. Not like they were friends, but they knew what it was like to fight in the public eye. For the country, the Conway-Crockett thing became a symbol of old versus methods in politics. Months later, when some politician lost his temper, people online said he needs to be calm like Jasmine. It became a saying. It goes to show how one little moment, quiet words after an outburst, could stick in a country that wants to see people act well under pressure. The best way to put it might be what Crockett said later when a student reporter asked what she thought during Conway's rant. "I thought about my grandma. She always told me if someone goes low, don't go there with them. Help them up instead. It's not just polite, it's smart. If you stay cool when someone else loses it, you win the most important battle, which is about character." Thanks for watching this political face-off. If you liked how being calm won over conflict, hit the like button and subscribe for more on important political moments. Leave a comment about who you think handled it better. See you in the next video. Kellyanne Conway stood at her spot in the CNN studio looking furious. Her hair was perfect despite her obvious anger. Across from her, Representative Jasmine Crockett looked calm with her hands neatly placed on the desk. "You have no class," Conway yelled, pointing at Crockett. Her voice echoed in the studio. "You sit there acting all high and mighty, telling me about morals after what your party has done?" The audience gasped. The moderator froze. Even the control room staff leaned forward. Conway seemed to have lost her cool, something she was known for keeping. But what happened next left everyone speechless. Jasmine Crockett's response, just 7 words delivered calmly, sent shockwaves online and changed how people view political arguments forever. If you're watching, like and subscribe so you don't miss our political analysis. We're going to show you what happened when these two powerful women clashed and why only one came out on top. CNN's special program, American Junctions, had been hyped for weeks. The idea was simple: bring political opponents together to debate the country's biggest issues. Tonight, it was Conway, the 57-year-old Republican who advised former President Trump, against Crockett, the 43-year-old rising star from Texas who quickly became a vocal voice in Congress. The stakes were high. With the midterm elections coming up and the country so divided, this was more than just another cable news fight. It was a battle for the heart of America. Conway arrived at the studio 3 hours early, as usual. She was known for being prepared and able to twist any situation to her advantage. People in Republican circles called her the comeback queen. After years in D.C., she had mastered political combat, leaving many opponents hurt by her sharp replies and loyalty to conservative beliefs. "Check my microphone," she told a production assistant. "Last time I was on CNN, it conveniently cut out whenever I made a point that went against their narrative." The young man nodded nervously and hurried off. Meanwhile, in another room, Crockett reviewed her notes one last time. The former civil rights lawyer had built her reputation on facts, not fancy speeches. Unlike many politicians who got ahead through connections, Crockett earned her spot by fighting for regular people in Texas courtrooms. Her calm demeanor hid a sharp legal mind that could take apart weak arguments with precision. "Congresswoman, we're ready for you in makeup," a producer said. Crockett nodded, closed her file, and took a deep breath. "Just remember," her chief of staff said, "Conway will try to provoke you." "That's what she does," Crockett smiled. "I've faced tougher opponents in courtrooms where my clients' lives were on the line. I'll be fine." Neither woman realized that this night would become one of the most watched political showdowns in recent history, with clips spreading online faster than anyone could have imagined. By morning, one would be praised for her composure, while the other would be doing damage control after a meltdown seen by millions. Michael Barnes, a seasoned news guy, knew the network wanted a fight, and Conway versus Crockett, that was the ultimate face-off in American politics. Old versus new, establishment versus change. As Barnes got set to kick things off, he figured he wouldn't have to push too hard to get things heated. These two women had worldviews that just clashed. "All right, folks," he said as they went live. "Tonight, we've got two big voices who don't usually see eye to eye. Can they find some common ground, or are we just too different to even talk. The first half hour was surprisingly chill. Conway and Crockett disagreed on immigration, the economy, and healthcare, but they kept it professional. Viewers hoping for instant drama might have been bored, but the political nerds could see the subtle jabs being thrown. Conway kept bringing up her years of experience, hinting that Crockett was a newbie who didn't get how things worked. When "You've been around as long as I have," she said with a tight smile, "you learn that things don't always go as planned." Crockett fired back with specific laws and cases, showing she really knew her stuff. "The truth is," she said, "millions of Americans are waiting for answers, not excuses." The tension in the studio was building. Barnes, sensing a chance for something big, moved the conversation into personal territory. "Ms. Conway, you've been slammed for defending things the former president said that weren't true. Congresswoman Crockett has called it putting loyalty over truth. What do you say to that?" Conway's face tightened. This was the topic she'd been warned about, the one that could blow up. She leaned in, gripping the podium. Coming from the Congresswoman. "That's a joke," Conway shot back, her voice sharper. "Her party makes promises they can't keep. At least, I'm honest about who I'm loyal to." The camera went to Crockett, who stayed cool but raised an eyebrow. "I think there's a difference between sticking with your party and backing things that hurt our democracy," she said. "I'm loyal to the Constitution and the people I represent, not just one person." Conway laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Please, you're loyal to whatever gets you votes and keeps you trending. Don't act like you're some hero when your party's trying to turn America into something else entirely." Barnes, feeling things get out of hand, tried to take back control. "Let's stick to the policies." "No, I want to talk about this," Conway interrupted, her face red. "I've listened to people like the Congresswoman lecture us about right and wrong while they twist history to fit their story. The hypocrisy is amazing." Crockett stayed calm. "If you want to point out specific times I've been hypocritical, I'm happy to talk about them, but vague accusations don't help anyone." The studio went quiet. Conway's breathing was loud in her microphone as she glared at Crockett. Something had shifted in her, a break in the perfect image she'd shown for years. "You want specifics? Fine." Conway fumbled through her papers, looking flustered. "Let's talk about your speech last month at Howard University, where you said that conservative policies have hurt minority communities. That's not just wrong, it's a lie to divide us." Crockett nodded slowly. "I stand by that, and I can back it up with facts." Conway's voice got louder. "Your so-called facts are picked to prove what you already believe. I've been around long enough to know how that game is played." Crockett, her voice steady but firm, told Conway, "This isn't some game to the families who are impacted by these policies. These are real folks facing real problems, and they deserve an honest conversation." Conway's eyes narrowed, and you could see she was starting to sweat under the studio lights. Crockett's calm was clearly bugging her. Conway shot back, her voice a bit shaky. "The problem with politicians like you is you use nice-sounding words to push policies that hurt the very people you say you're helping. It's just for show." The camera caught a slight change in Crockett's face. Not anger, but like she understood what was making Conway so upset. "Ms. Conway," she said quietly, "I spent 15 years defending people who couldn't afford fancy lawyers. I've been with families who lost their homes, their health care, and sometimes their freedom because of bad policies. My concern isn't for show. It comes from seeing it firsthand." Conway slammed her hand on the podium. "And I've spent 30 years defending American values, the ones that built this country. Your party seems determined to tear them down." Barnes tried to jump in. "Let's calm down," but Conway kept going, her voice getting louder. "I'm not going to sit here and be lectured about caring by someone who's been in Washington for 5 minutes." She turned to the camera. "The American people aren't stupid. They can see through the fake talk." Things got wild after that. As Crockett started to answer, Conway suddenly grabbed a folder and pulled out a screenshot of a social media post. "You want to talk about honesty?" Conway yelled. "This is from your campaign manager suggesting my old boss should be locked up without a trial, and you approved it." She waved the paper at the cameras. "Is this how you defend the Constitution?" Barnes tried to step in. "Miss Conway, we need to check those documents first." But Conway was beyond listening. Years of staying calm had broken down, and her raw emotions were on display. "Everyone knows what's going on here," she screamed, her voice cracking. "The double standards, the fake outrage, the holier-than-thou act while you tear down everything that made America great." The studio went quiet. The producers in the control room held their breath. This was the kind of real moment that TV execs dream of, messy, unfiltered, and guaranteed to get attention. All eyes turned to Jasmine Crockett. Crockett took a slow sip of water, keeping eye contact with Conway. The contrast was striking. Conway standing, flushed and breathing hard, clutching papers in her shaking hand, versus Crockett sitting, calm and looking thoughtful. This pause seemed to make Conway even angrier. "What's wrong? Nothing in your prepared notes to deal with this?" she demanded, still yelling. Crockett put down her glass gently and leaned forward. When she spoke, her voice was quiet but clear. "Miss Conway, I see where you're coming from." Those words, said without any hint of sarcasm, seemed to catch Conway off guard. "But I think the American people deserve a conversation, not a fight," Crockett continued. "If you want to talk about that social media media post, I'm happy to, but maybe we should both take a breath first. Conway stayed standing, but you could see her starting to doubt herself, like she realized how she looked to the folks watching at home. Crockett nodded toward the paper Conway was holding. Can I see that post? After a moment, Conway handed the paper to Barnes, who gave it to Crockett. The Congresswoman looked at it and then nodded. Thanks for pointing this out. This is a post from someone who volunteered for my campaign briefly last year, not my campaign manager. We got rid of them because their words didn't match our values. I never approved this message, and I've spoken out against this kind of language, no matter who uses it. Conway started to interrupt, but Crockett raised her hand slightly, not in a rude way, but with the calm confidence of someone who knows how to run a courtroom. If I can finish, Miss Conway, I understand why you're frustrated. We both care about our country, but we have different ideas about how to make it better. But I think we can disagree without hating each other. The American people deserve better than a show. Conway slowly sat back down, clearly trying to regain her composure. That's convenient, she said, her voice less sharp. Blame it on a volunteer and act like you're better than everyone else. Crockett shook her head. I'm not acting like I'm better than anyone. I'm just saying that maybe we both want what's best for America, even if we don't agree on what that means. Can we at least agree on that? The question hung in the air. Conway seemed stuck between wanting to attack and realizing that Crockett's calm was making her look bad. Of course, I want what's best for America, Conway finally said, her voice still tight but no longer yelling. But your party's policies would change this country in ways that many Americans don't want. Crockett nodded. That's a fair point to argue, and I could say that some of the things you've supported have hurt the people I represent. But instead of just blaming each other, maybe we could talk about specific issues where people need real solutions, not just catchy phrases. Barnes, seeing a chance to change the subject, quickly jumped in. That sounds like a good plan. Let's talk about the infrastructure bill that's in Congress right now. Congresswoman Crockett, your party wants it to pass. And Miss Conway, many in your party are worried about how much it will cost. Can we talk about that? Before they could move on, Conway, still a little shaken, tried one more time to get the upper hand. Before we change the subject, she said, sounding more in control but still stressed, I want to make something clear. The Congresswoman can act all reasonable and calm, but her voting record tells a different story. She supported some of the most extreme laws ever proposed in Congress. Crockett didn't seem bothered by the comment. Instead, she smiled slightly. I'm proud of my voting record, and I'm happy to explain why I voted the way I did. What specific law are you worried about, Miss Conway? Conway seemed caught off guard by this direct question. She shuffled through her notes. Well, there's the Green Deal stuff that would ruin our energy industry. I'd be happy to talk about that, Crockett answered. But I should mention that what actually passed was different from the original plan, with compromises to address concerns from states that produce energy. My district includes energy workers, and I wouldn't support anything that didn't help those communities transition. Conway looked more and more uncomfortable as Crockett kept answering with facts instead of getting defensive. The situation had completely changed. Conway, who usually controlled conversations with emotion and quick changes of subject, was facing someone who wouldn't let her get away with it. The truth is, Crockett continued, looking straight at the camera, Americans are tired of watching politicians yell at each other. They want us to solve problems. Miss Conway and I disagree on a lot, but I respect her years of service to her party and her country. We don't have to be enemies to disagree. The studio audience, who had been told to stay silent, suddenly started clapping. Barnes tried to quiet them, but it was clear that Crockett's words had struck a chord. Conway sat silently, her face unreadable. Maybe for the first time in her career, she didn't have a good response. Trying to attack again after Crockett's classy answer would only make her look worse. As the clapping died down, Barnes saw a chance to get back on track. Let's get back to infrastructure, which is important to Americans everywhere. The debate went on for another half hour, but things had changed for good. Conway was noticeably less aggressive and even agreed with Crockett on a few points. Crockett kept giving facts, but in a warm way that didn't make her seem cold. When Barnes turned to the cameras for his closing remarks, the contrast between the beginning and the end of the show was amazing. We saw something special tonight, he said, from a heated argument to something close to a real conversation. Maybe there's a lesson here for all of us in how we talk about politics. As the cameras were about to turn off, Crockett did something unexpected. She stood up and offered her hand to Conway. For a moment, Conway hesitated, thinking about how it would look to her supporters, but in the end, her professional side won over, and she stood up and shook Crockett's hand. Thank you for the conversation, Crockett said loudly enough for her microphone to pick it up. I've followed your career for a long time, and while we disagree on a lot, you're incredibly tough. Conway seemed surprised by the genuine compliment. Thank you, Congresswoman, she replied, sounding stiff but not mean. You're definitely well prepared. As the show ended and the lights went down, neither woman could have guessed the storm that was about to hit social media or how people would see their conversation as an example of staying calm under pressure. The reaction was immediate. While the CNN crew was still taking down the set, clips of the argument were already spreading online. The contrast was compelling. Conway shouting versus Crockett's calm response. Within an hour, Calm Like Jasmine was trending on Twitter. People were sharing the clip of Crockett saying, "Miss Conway, I appreciate where you're coming from," with comments like, "This is how you handle someone trying to start a fight. It's a lesson in emotional intelligence." Calm like Jasmine. Notice how Crockett didn't need to raise her voice to take charge. Power doesn't always look the way you expect. By midnight, the original CNN clip on YouTube had over 2 million views, with the comments mostly praising Crockett's calm. Even conservatives were impressed with. "I don't agree with Crockett's politics, but I respect how she handled that situation. Conway lost it, and it wasn't a good look. This is why yelling doesn't work anymore. The calm person always seems more reasonable no matter what the argument is." Morning shows across networks covered the exchange, with analysts breaking down what happened. On ABC's Good Morning America, political analyst Rachel Martin said, "We saw a perfect example of the difference between old and new styles in American politics. Conway represents a time when getting angry got results. Crockett represents a newer approach that values facts and reason over emotion." On Fox News, opinions were more split. Some commentators criticized Conway for losing her cool, while others defended her passion. "Kellyanne was fighting for traditional American values," said one host. "Sometimes that fight requires emotion," but the story was mostly being driven by how viral Crockett's response had become. Memes of her calm face next to Conway's angry gestures spread across Instagram and TikTok, often with audio of songs about staying calm. Young people seemed especially drawn to Crockett's style. A high school debate coach in Michigan told a local news station, "I've already had 3 students say they want to learn Congresswoman Crockett's technique. She showed that you can be firm without being aggressive." By noon the next day, both women had responded to the public reaction, each in their own way. Crockett posted a simple message on Twitter: "Political disagreement is good in a democracy. Personal attacks aren't. Let's debate ideas strongly, but treat each other with respect. It's not weakness, it's smart." The post got over 500,000 likes. In a few hours, Conway's response came in a phone interview with a friendly conservative radio host. "Of course, they're attacking me for showing passion," she said, sounding defensive. "When conservatives fight for their values, we're called angry or crazy. When progressives do the same thing, they're brave and speaking truth to power. It's a clear double standard." When the host gently suggested that her approach might have helped Crockett, Conway bristled. "I don't regret standing up for what I believe in." Someone had to call out the hypocrisy. By that afternoon, political strategists were talking about what the exchange meant. Democratic consultant Maria Cardona told CNN, "Congresswoman Crockett showed a new way to deal with political opponents who try to provoke you by refusing to get angry. She completely changed the game." Republican strategist Alex Castellanos, known for his honesty, admitted that Conway had made a mistake. "In today's media world, losing your cool almost never works. The person who stays calm usually wins, no matter what the argument is." Conway is smart enough to know that, which makes her losing it even more surprising. Crockett's office was flooded with requests for her to appear on news shows and talk shows. Her communications director said they got over 60 interview requests within 24 hours of the debate. Crockett turned down most of them, choosing to appear only on her regular online town hall, where she didn't focus on the argument. "I'd rather talk about the infrastructure bill we need to pass," she told her constituents. "That affects your lives more than a heated moment on TV." This reasonable response only made her look even better. Meanwhile, Conway found herself in a tough position. Longtime friends were privately worried about her unusual loss of control. A former colleague told Politico on condition of anonymity, "Kellyanne has always been the one who gets under other people's skin, not the other way around." Something about Crockett really got to her. The media continued to analyze the argument throughout the week, looking beyond the immediate exchange to talk about bigger issues in political debate. On PBS NewsHour, historian Doris Kearns Goodwin pointed out historical similarities throughout American history. We've seen shifts in how politicians communicate. Lincoln's careful arguments were different from the fiery speeches of his time. FDR's fireside chats created closeness during a crisis. We may be seeing another shift where reason becomes more persuasive than anger. The impact went beyond media. Talk to actual political results. Democratic House leaders, seeing Crockett's new popularity, asked her to lead the message on several important issues. "She's shown she can talk about complex ideas without pushing away potential allies," explained one Democratic strategist. "That's rare these days." Crockett's fundraising also jumped, with her campaign reporting a 300% increase in small donations in the week after the CNN appearance. More importantly, several moderate political action committees that had stayed neutral in her races now wanted to support her future campaigns. For Conway, the situation required careful handling. After her first defensive response, wiser heads in her circle seemed to have stepped in. 3 days after the debate, she appeared on a conservative podcast where she sounded more thoughtful. "Politics is an emotional business," she said. "Sometimes that emotion gets the better of us. I stand by my concerns about the Congresswoman's policies, but I could have said them better." This limited admission helped slow the negative coverage. Though the clips continued to spread online, the exchange sparked a broader conversation about being civil in public. Editorial boards across the country mentioned the Conway-Crockett argument while calling for a new approach to discussing political differences. The Washington Post wrote, "In a time when yelling and personal attacks have become normal, Congresswoman Crockett's response to Conway was refreshing. It showed that staying calm isn't just just about being polite. It's a good way to make sure your arguments are actually heard. Even the Wall Street Journal, which usually supports conservative views, noted while Conway's frustrations may be shared by many Americans who feel their values are under attack, her way of speaking undermined her message. There's a lesson here for all political communicators. Academic institutions also took notice. Dr. Jennifer Mercieka, a historian of American political speaking at Texas A&M University, told NPR that the exchange would likely be in textbooks. About political communication, what makes this moment important is how well it shows the change in effective political speaking in the social media age. When everything can be clipped, shared, and remembered instantly, emotional outbursts become problems, not advantages. 2 weeks after the debate, public polls showed the long-term impact on both women's images. Conway's favorability ratings had dropped 7 points among independent voters, while Crockett's had increased by 12 points in the same group. More telling was a question about which woman people would trust to handle a crisis calmly. Crockett led by 24 points overall, and even by 8 points among Republicans. Perhaps the most important long-term result came a month later, when Crockett was invited to give a TED Talk called Calmness as a The impact went beyond media talk to actual political results. Democratic House leaders, seeing Crockett's new popularity, asked her to lead the message on several important issues. She's shown she can talk about complex ideas without pushing. A way potential allies, explained one Democratic strategist. That's rare these days. Crockett's fundraising also jumped, with her campaign reporting a 300% increase in small donations in the week after the CNN appearance. More importantly, several moderate political action committees that had stayed neutral in her races now wanted to support her future campaigns. For Conway, the situation required careful handling. After her first defensive response, wiser heads in her circle seemed to have stepped in. 3 days after the debate, she appeared on a conservative podcast where she sounded more thoughtful. "Politics is an emotional business," she said. "Sometimes that emotion gets the better of us. I stand by my concerns about the Congresswoman's policies, but I could have said them better." This limited admission helped slow the negative coverage, though the clips continued to spread online. The exchange sparked a broader conversation about being civil in public. Editorial boards across the country mentioned the Conway-Crockett argument while calling for a new approach to discussing political differences. The Washington Post wrote, "In a time when yelling and personal attacks have become normal, Congresswoman Crockett's response to Conway was refreshing. It showed that staying calm isn't just about being polite. It's a good way to make sure your arguments are actually heard." Even the Wall Street Journal, which usually supports conservative views, noted, while Conway's frustrations may be shared by many Americans who feel their values are under attack, her way of speaking undermined her message. There's a lesson here for all political communicators. Academic institutions also took notice. Dr. Jennifer Mercieka, a historian of American political speaking at Texas A&M University, told NPR that the exchange would likely be in textbooks. About political communication, what makes this moment important is how well it shows the change in effective political speaking in the social media age. When everything can be clipped, shared, and remembered instantly, emotional outbursts become problems, not advantages. 2 weeks after the debate, public polls showed the long-term impact on both women's images. Conway's favorability ratings had dropped 7 points among independent voters, while Crockett's had increased by 12 points in the same group. More telling was a question about which woman people would trust to handle a crisis calmly. Crockett led by 24 points overall, and even by 8 points among Republicans. Perhaps the most important long-term result came a month later when Crockett was invited to give a TED Talk called Calmness as a Political Strategy. The talk, which used her exchange with Conway as a starting point for talking about effective communication in divided times, was viewed over 5 million times in its first week online. The loudest voice in the room rarely has the biggest impact. Crockett told the audience, "True strength isn't about being loud or intense, but about being able to stay steady when others lose their balance." As for Conway, the incident ended up being a minor event rather than a defining one in her career. Political memories are short, and her decades of effective communication weren't erased by one heated exchange. Still, people noticed that her later media appearances were more measured, as if she realized she needed to update her approach. 6 months after their argument, Conway and Crockett unexpectedly found themselves on the same panel at a conference on women in leadership. People held their breath, expecting tension or awkwardness. Instead, they saw something more complex. As they passed in the green room before the event, Conway reportedly stopped Crockett briefly. "You handled that well," she said, referring to their previous encounter. "I would have done the same at your age." Crockett smiled. "I doubt that. You've always been tough, Miss Conway. That hasn't changed." The exchange, overheard by a production assistant who later shared it with reporters, revealed something important about both women. Beneath the political images and beyond the viral moments, there was a professional respect, not friendship or even admiration, but an understanding of the strange connection between those who fight their battles in the harsh world of public opinion. For the American public, the Conway-Crockett argument became a reference point in discussions about political communication, a shorthand for the difference between old and new ways of disagreeing. When a senator lost his temper during a committee hearing months later, social media users immediately commented he should have gone calm. Like Jasmine, the phrase had become part of the political language. It was a testament to how a single exchange, 7 calm words in response to an emotional outburst, could resonate in a country hungry for examples of staying calm under pressure. The lasting legacy of that night can best be summed up by a comment Crockett made a year later when a student reporter asked what she had been thinking during Conway's outburst. "I was thinking about my grandmother," Crockett replied. "She always told me, when others go low, don't join them there. Instead, offer them a hand up. It's not just good manners, it's a good plan. Because when you stay steady while someone else loses control, you've already won the most important battle, the one for your own dignity." Thanks for watching this dramatic political showdown between Kellyanne Conway and Jasmine Crockett. If you enjoyed this analysis of how staying calm can win over confrontation, hit the like button now and subscribe to our channel for more insights into today's most important political moments. Drop a comment below telling us who you think handled this situation better, and we'll see you in our next video.